This is Advanced Autonomy. I'm Luke Renner. My guest today is a colleague of mine here at Cyngn, Ben Landen. Ben is the Senior Director of Product and Partnerships, and if we're being honest, my boss. Ben has been in the self-driving space for most of his career. He was the head of product and business at DeepScale, a startup that built computer vision solutions using deep learning. DeepScale was acquired by Tesla in 2019. Prior to that, Ben ran an automotive semiconductor product line at Maxim Integrated. Hundreds of millions of his products are embedded in vehicles all over the world. In this conversation, we'll be talking about the changes that have come to the autonomous vehicle sector in recent years, particularly last year, as COVID transformed the way organizations all over the world do business. Hi, Ben.
Hey, Luke. Good to be here.
This is, of course, our inaugural interview. So, just to get started, can you tell me a little bit about what you do here at Syngn?
Yeah, so I've been at Cyngn almost 2 years now. So since the acquisition of DeepScale by Tesla, what I do is basically everything. I head up everything that's not finance or engineering. And within a startup, you typically do a little bit of everything, and we definitely get exposure to that here at Cyngn.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I want to talk about the frenzy that happened a few years ago. Elon Musk famously said we would all be using self-driving cars by 2017. I think a lot of that has cooled off now, and we sort of entered a new phase. So, how do you think about all the shifts that have happened?
So we really are in this phase of an increase in pragmatism in terms of starting to find ways to generate some returns on the huge investments that have gone into AV, while still having these far-reaching goals that are way out on the horizon that are now, I'd say, looked at with more scrutiny than they were in the frenzy when folks were saying that cars would be driving themselves all over the place.
What do you think explains why we're not there yet?
Bottom line, it's just a really complicated problem. I mean, the reason that I have dedicated my career to autonomous driving like I have is that I genuinely think that it's one of the most technically challenging and therefore fulfilling and interesting subjects that I'll have the opportunity to work on in my lifetime.
Why do you think the sector got this all wrong? Did they know they were off base, or was it an honest mistake?
That's a good question. I mean, the part of me that wants to believe that we all intend to do good and that we share our true beliefs wants to say that it was an honest mistake, and that it's just one of those situations where, as you peel back the onion, once you see that something is working, let's say in a certain environment or on a certain vehicle, and you try to replicate that, you learn firsthand that it's just much more difficult than you ever thought that it would be, and that's a contributor. But the cynic in me says that with the right type of announcements and noise, a lot of people benefited significantly off of the hype that is autonomous vehicles in the 2015 to 2020 timeframe, where yeah, a lot of investment, a lot of monetary success was created without much delivery of end product quite yet.
Yeah. So I know that a lot of companies in the space have really focused on what I know you have described as kind of the robo-taxi version of this problem. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what are the other sort of subsectors in this space? What are the other areas of interest that people are really doing work on?
Yeah, so robotaxi is definitely a focus, and especially in the media, for a couple of reasons. One, it's the biggest market opportunity in terms of what's estimated to be the total disruption opportunity that's available to self-driving vehicles. So the robotaxis make up on the order of, it's $3 to $4 trillion is the typical estimate of what folks think is going to be a $7 trillion disruption across all industries. So that's why the focus is there, and it's one of the most complex problem spaces. So going back to working on very challenging problems, you have uh, the biggest pot of gold at the end of the rainbow there, and you also have the most enticing area for engineers to work. But you have all of these. smaller verticals, which even a small vertical in autonomous driving tends to be like $100 billion plus market opportunity, that range all the way down into warehouse robotics, into mining, into varied applications of similar things that robotaxis do, where you narrow it down to just the last mile, just the middle mile, and then you can create all sorts of operational design domain, ODD in the jargon, constraints that help you sort of parcel down that enormous problem space of robotaxis into something that's more manageable, which then correlates to a smaller market. But as far as we can see, any one of these markets is big enough to essentially be its own industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, because I work here, I understand that Cyngn is really focused on those more narrow ODD spaces. So I wanted to ask you, as you've been talking to people, in warehouse yards, companies that do mining, what has shifted about the conversation over these last few years?
What I've seen has been the really major shift is you don't need to go into a first conversation or a meeting and convince people that they want autonomy or that autonomy is coming soon. That is generally agreed upon now, which is fantastic, right? Because we're no longer making the case that a disruption is coming and trying to help people see the future. That's largely agreed upon at this point, which means that we can talk about actual solutions.
COVID has really affected everything and really changed the way people all over the world are living and conducting business. How has COVID just changed how Cyngn as a company operates?
COVID was definitely, still is, a double-edged sword. We saw the type of pullback that you would expect when there are fears of recessions, when folks can't go to work due to the constraints of the pandemic, and the type of retraction that creates in the willingness of, again, those customers who had come to the conclusion that they want to be working on and developing autonomous solutions with partners and deploying autonomous solutions. They now said, in spite of that, we're going to have to wait. And all the way to the flip side of that, though, where you'd have people that say, hey, we had a realization that our operations can actually continue in spite of this pandemic if we can take humans out of the loop in certain scenarios. And we now have, call it a COVID solution task force, where we need machines that can automate elements of our operation so that they're safer and so that we can keep shipping products, so that we can keep accepting shipments from our suppliers. And so we saw both of those, and unfortunately, I would say the more pronounced impact was the negative one.
You mentioned during our pre-interview that mining has become an area of interest for Cyngn. So my question is, what can you say about the particular challenges mining operations face that autonomy would be good for?
Quite a few come to mind. There are a variety of different mining, call it, types of ODDs or sites, which each have their own implications on the technology, from open pit mines to underground mines. I mean, you can just envision how different those are to navigate for an autonomous solution. It has major implications on the perception system, on localization. Beyond that, though, as you dig into what really how these mines operate, uh, definitely for me, one of a huge insight that I had never thought of coming from the traditional automotive industry was that in underground mines, obviously very safety oriented, and there is this constant mining and excavation, further excavation activity that needs to be balanced. So when you're excavating and potentially blasting underground, basically no humans are allowed on the site because it's very dangerous. In these blast scenarios, you literally have to shut down the operation for hours. Like, every human must leave the site. Only the blasting or excavating may occur. Then they tend to wait for a period after that to make sure everything is settled down. And the if some of these mines are remote too, it might actually be a pretty long distance between the mine and wherever everybody would need to go to leave the mine. And so these mines that want to operate 24/7 for years and years and years need to go down for hours at a time to enable this further excavation. And that's massive, right? That's huge. You have these operations that are 24/7, and everybody's excited about percents worth of efficiency. And here we have like massive chunks of of efficiency that are just being thrown away by nature of how they do things today.
So, there's no doubt that the rise of autonomous vehicles is going to lead to a shift in how people do work. It could lead to displacement, it could lead to layoffs. And I just wanted to get your thoughts about this transition that you're working every day to help build.
The the automation that we're targeting first and foremost is frankly what people are not particularly good at or don't want to do. So for example, graveyard shifts of very repetitive tasks, not really an attractive job. Now we can augment that, and maybe now a person can, instead of sitting in a vehicle that is moving cargo around out in the cold in the middle of the night, can sit in an office and watch that vehicle and multiple vehicles on a screen, be more comfortable, be more willing to do that job, and develop skills that are probably more transferable to having job mobility and being able to do to switch to other various similar jobs, which would be uh, computer facing, user interface, human machine interfaces, and the types of skills that are more translatable to the type of technology developments that we're seeing come out of the leading companies today, as opposed to saying I can drive this type of machine, I can do this type of task. And and to me that's exciting and is going to uh, create upside.
So, when you're in conversations with business leaders and organizations are, autonomous vehicle curious, what are some common misconceptions that you find yourself having to clear up over and over?
Autonomy is not a product that you can just click order and buy your autonomous vehicle and plug it in and it works. We're not there yet. It requires partnership to get value out of autonomous vehicles today.
Okay, so we're almost out of time, and I just want to finish up by asking you, what are you excited about in 2021? How do you think the space will evolve? What are you looking forward to?
I do think that we're starting to see some light at the end of the pandemic tunnel, which I think obviously is a positive for all of us. And in the case of business and the potential, that means we do have opportunities that maybe took a step back last year, coming back around and saying, "Hey, I'm ready to work on this now," and we're going to be seeing not just from us, but from other great technology developers in various autonomous verticals. We're seeing more and more small scale deployments. You're hearing about them more. You're hearing about older, more traditional companies starting down the journey to autonomy, whether it's by adopting teleoperation solutions first, or whether it's by installing various sensors or ECUs that enable telemetry that they never had before. And I think we're just going to start kind of chipping away at this big scary problem of autonomy, and making people realize that we can make our way to it gradually, either by scale or by how we scope the problem, and that we're basically just going to see a lot more autonomous solutions rolling out. It's going up from here.
That's fantastic. All right, Ben, thanks so much for the time. It's been fun.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
All right.